Welcome back. The trial of Celia. So this is a case of Missouri versus Celia, 1855, and it's about a woman, 19-year-old teen who killed her enslaver to get him to stop raping her. Celia's trial came at a time of heightened tensions over the issue of slavery. In 1854, Congress had passed the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which repealed the Missouri Compromise of 1820 and allowed settlers in those territories to decide for themselves whether to permit slavery within their boundaries. Northern opposition to the new law led to the establishment of the Republican Party and to campaigns by both pro-slavery and anti-slavery groups to influence the outcomes of elections in Kansas. Some prominent Missouri figures, such as the U.S. Senator David Atchison and University of Missouri President James Shannon, encouraged their slave state residents to counter the efforts of the abolitionists who were moving to Kansas in hope of keeping it slave-free. Pro-slavery mobs of Missourians attacked both free soil voters, those are against slavery in Kansas, and threatened fellow Missourians who dared to criticize their bullying tactics. By the summer of 1855, Missouri was awash with pro-slavery rhetoric, and increasingly active vigilante groups organized to ensure Kansas would enter the Union as a slave state. On October 6, 3 days before the start of Celia's trial, John Brown arrived in Kansas that contained two state legislatures, one supporting Kansas's admission as a free state and one enacting slave laws. On Missouri's western border, the possibility of civil war seemed real. The political implications of Celia's trials could not have escaped Circuit Court Judge William Hall. Certainly he knew pro-slavery Missourians expected Celia to hang. Hall's choice as Celia's defense attorney, John Jameson, was a safe one. Jameson's reputation as a competent, genial member of the bar and his lack of involvement in the heated slavery debates, despite being a slave owner himself, like which side is he on, ensured that his selection would not be seriously contested. Jameson could provide the defendant with satisfactory, but not too satisfactory representation. Nothing has changed. In addition, Hall appointed two young lawyers, Isaac Bulwer and Nathan Coons, to assist Jameson in his defense. Celia's jurors, of course, were all male. They ranged in age from 34 to 75, and with one exception, were married with children. All were farmers. Several were slave owners. The prosecution's first witness, Jefferson Jones, described his conversation with Celia in the Callaway County Jail. He told jurors Celia's account of the murder and how she disposed of the body. On cross-examination, Jameson questioned Jones about what Celia had said about the sexual nature of her relationship to the deceased. Jones testified that he had heard, quote, Newsome's rape her soon after purchase from an Audrain County farmer, and that Celia told him that Newsome had continued to demand sex in the 5 years that followed. Jones also acknowledged that Celia had told him that she did not intend to kill Newsome, only to hurt him. Virginia Wainscott, which is Newsome's eldest daughter, testified next. She described the search for her father on direct examination, testifying, I hunted on all of the paths and walks and every place for him, including caves and along the creeks, but I found no trace of him. Virginia faced questioning on cross-examination concerning Celia's possible motives for the killing. She admitted that Celia became pregnant, quote, took sick in February, and had been sick ever since, too sick to even cook for the Newsomes. But she somehow is not questioning about the fact that Celia begged her to get her father to leave her alone. After Coffee Wainscott described for juries his unknowing dumping of his grandfather's ashes, William Powell took the stand. Jameson cross-examined Paul vigorously, gaining admission from the search party that he had threatened Celia with the loss of her children and with hanging to obtain her confession. Powell also testified that Celia had complained that Newsom repeatedly demanded sex and that the slave girl had approached other Newsom family members in a vain attempt to stop the rapes. Powell also admitted that Celia told him that her attack on Newsom came from desperation and that she only intended to injure, not kill her master. After Powell's testimony, the prosecution called 2 doctors who identified the bone fragments found in Celia's cabin as those from an adult human. Following the doctor's testimony, the state rested its case. Dr. James Martin, a Fulton physician, testified first for the defense. Celia as a slave was not called as a witness. Under the existing law in Missouri and most other states, a criminal defendant could not, under the interest party rule, testify. Jameson posed for Martin question designed to suggest that Celia was incapable of committing the alleged crime without the aid of another person. The defense attorney asked whether a human body could be so completely destroyed in a simple fireplace in a space of 6 or so hours, but the question met with a prosecution objection, which Judge Hall sustained. Jameson tried rephrasing the question a couple of different ways. What, in your opinion, as a scientific physician, would be the time required to destroy an adult human body? But fared no better with the objections and was forced to abandon that line of questioning. Of course, the judge is trying to thwart the attempts to get her freed. Like, if there are other people, then she's not the primary person causing the death, and then, there's something else. But no, the judge is not going with that one. The second and last defense witness, Thomas Shopman, testified that during her jailhouse interview, Celia had said that after she struck Newsom the first time, he threw his hand up to catch her. The judge, however, again sustained a prosecution objection to the testimony, and jurors were instructed to ignore the evidence that suggested the second and fatal blow came only after Celia was physically threatened. Satisfied, perhaps, that the jury had at least heard the reasons for Celia's desperate act, Jameson rested his case. So if he raised his hand to catch her, of course, it's like imminent harm, you're trying to protect yourself, then it's self-defense. But the judge, again, not being a judge, but being a biased, evil villain, is making sure she doesn't win. Judge Hall's jury instructions made an acquittal almost but impossible. He rejected all 9 proposed defense instructions that addressed the question of motive or degree of culpability. Among those thrown out were instructions that would have allowed the jury to return a not guilty verdict if they believed that Celia killed Newsom in an attempt to fight off his sexual advances. The defense, for example, proposed that the jury be told that they could acquit Celia on self-defense theory if she believed she was in imminent danger of forced sexual intercourse. Instead of suggesting any viable self-defense argument, the tainted Judge Hall instructed, I said tainted, they are not writing that, Hall instructed jurors that the defendant had no right to kill Newsom because he came into her cabin and was talking to her about having sexual intercourse with her or anything else. Given the threat, the defense proposed instructions presented to the established understandings concerning the very minimal rights of the slaves, Hall's pro-prosecution instructions should have come as no surprise. Neither is it likely was anyone in the Callaway County Courthouse surprised when on October 10th, my birthday, the jury quickly convicted Celia of first-degree murder. Celia's attorney appeared again in court the next day to move for a new trial based on Judge Hall's evidentiary rulings during the proceeding and his alleged erroneous instructions. Judge Hall took 24 hours to consider the defense motion, then rejected it and sentenced Celia to be hanged by the neck until death on the 16th day of November 1855. The defense motion that it be allowed to appeal the judge's ruling to the Missouri Supreme Court was granted. We're up to the epilogue. We're almost done. Epilogue. In jail awaiting her execution, Celia delivered a stillborn child. As the date for her execution approached, still no word had come from Jefferson City on her appeal filed in the Missouri Supreme Court. The possibility that she might be hanged before her appeal was decided seemed ever more real to Celia's defense team and whoever else she might count among her supporters. Something had to be done. On November 11, 5 days before her scheduled date with the gallows, Celia and another inmate were removed from the Callaway County Jail, either with the assistance or the knowledge of her defense lawyer. The defense team, in a letter to Supreme Court Justice Abel Leonard, written less than a month after her escape, noted that Celia was taken out of jail by someone, and they felt more than ordinary interest in behalf of the girl Celia. Owing to the circumstances of her act, Celia was returned to jail by whom it is not known in late November, only after her scheduled execution date had passed. Following her return, Judge Hall set a new execution date of December 21, a date the defense hoped that would give the Supreme Court time to issue its decision on her appeal. The Supreme Court ruled against Celia in her appeal. In December 14, ordered, the state justice said, they thought it proper to refuse the prayer of the petitioner, having found no probable cause for her appeal. The stay of execution, the justices wrote, is refused. Celia was interviewed for a final time in her cell on the evening before her execution. Again, she denied that anyone assisted her or abetted her in any way. She told her interrogator, as reported in the Fulton Telegraph, quote, as soon as I struck him, the devil got into me, and I struck him with a stick until he was dead, and then rolled him into the fire and burnt him up. Celia died on the gallows at 2:30 p.m. on December 21, 1855, 10 years before slavery would end. Did the devil get into her, or pent up rage about injustice, about you were created for love, to be loved, not to have your boundaries violated? And at some point, people just snap. You mess around with them, and finally you find out that you messed around with the wrong person and they're not going to have it. So I feel real empathy. There's this 19-year-old, 20-year-old, and she has to hang because she refused to be sexually exploited. And I wish I could say that no longer happens, but it's still, women are given harsh sentences when they kill their abuser, when they kill the people who are trying to rape them. So history just keeps repeating itself. But tell me, what do you think? And thanks so much for listening.